Well, Bitcoin hitting yet another all-time high today, topping 118,000. The run-up comes ahead of Crypto Week in Washington, where Congress is set to consider key legislation for the industry. Our next guest says the cryptocurrency could march to $1 million. Will Reeves is the CEO of Fold, a Bitcoin financial services platform, and he joins us now. Will, I'd love to sort of get your take on why we're seeing Bitcoin move higher. I know it doesn't always trade on fundamentals, but is anything that's happening in Washington potentially influencing the price of Bitcoin this week?
I think this is just inevitable. This is what happens when massive demand meets the finite supply of Bitcoin. And what we're seeing right now is the supply shock in motion. So I'd certainly say what we are seeing is the fundamentals of Bitcoin in play.
And so you think that it will begin to start to move more on fundamentals and potentially even more so once it gets these sort of stamps of, hey, this is good stuff from Washington?
I think the stamps of approval have always been good. It enables new capital allocators to start to invest. And what we've seen recently with the rise of Bitcoin treasury companies, the ETFs, is that entirely new classes of capital are able to invest in the asset. And what we're seeing is what happens when trillions of dollars start knocking on the door, the price tends to go up. And so the fundamentals have always been there. Investors have been waiting for their ability to get involved.
What would it take for some of the other coins, altcoins, to kind of get the vote of approval or stamp of approval, if you will, in terms of Bitcoins? Because, if you think back to meme coins, the Doges, the early stages of Bitcoin, it was really the early adopters that really kind of formed that cohort that pushed it higher. What will it take for us to see that transition into some of the other coins that are still branded as more speculative?
Frankly, I think they're going to remain speculative. Bitcoin dominance is at 60% and rising. I think what we're seeing is an inevitable trend towards the signal, the apex asset. The issue is that Bitcoin is the only credibly neutral digital asset that is in issuance. All the other tokens are still proving an extraordinarily speculative use case without the track record of Bitcoin. And so what we are seeing today is the continued march of Bitcoin dominating this entire market. And I am waiting for the day when that changes. But ultimately, what we've seen is something that can't be reversed.
Well, it's Tim. Thanks for joining us. I guess as I think about, you talk about the pools of capital and you talk about, how much money might be chasing it. How do you feel about the banks that are now kind of being forced to be at least on board with the stablecoin world? And, JP Morgan has been a reluctant player, and yet behind the scenes, they are very active. So just curious your take on that.
I think you're exactly right. All the detractors or from traditional financial world are now suddenly its biggest promoters. The regulatory landscape has changed so much that 4,000 FDIC-insured banks, the bulge brackets, all need a Bitcoin strategy. Like you said, many of them have been doing this behind the scenes. Others are scrambling and going to be late to this. But ultimately, we are seeing everything converge in Bitcoin. Again, this is not a rally. This is an entire movement and fundamental phase shift in the monetary foundation.
So we were speaking a little earlier on the show about the price of gold and the price of gold moving higher, and so too is Bitcoin. Do you believe that going forward that you're going to see those pairs continue to march in the same direction for similar reasons, if you think Bitcoin is now finally moving towards fundamentals?
I think Bitcoin and gold have always had a similar appeal to investors. They've just been different. Bitcoin has always been really a millennial-driven asset. Gold has been held by much older generations. But what we see now, there are more Bitcoin holders in the U.S. than those that are holding gold. Ultimately, Bitcoin will eclipse gold as the preferred sound money asset for Americans and for the world. And that's where I firmly come to believe that Bitcoin is on its inevitable march to $1 million.